Oh, hello, everybody. We are back for another episode of Unfuck Your Body, and this time we are talking about the shoulder. I realize that's backwards, but I put it up there anyway. Okay, so we are waiting for Dr. Arnika to chime in. I'm going to make sure that this is set up well. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment box. Hi, Trevor. Hello. If you have any questions, please put them in there. Here comes Dr. Arnika. We want to make sure that we address the things that are bothering you specifically. We do a very general introduction to of the body, but if you have specific questions, you need to reach out, or if there's something specifically bothering you, because we may touch on it, but we might not address the exact thing that you need to have worked on. Hello, Doc. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, Ty. How are you?
Talking about some important stuff today. The shoulders.
Yes, shoulders, yes.
Capable of so much.
A lot of shit.
It's capable of a lot. Unfortunately, it's capable of a little too much. Right. So, all right. So we're going to get right into it. Right. So, the shoulder is very similar to the hip. Right. So we have very similar joints as far as the upper body and lower body is concerned. Right. So the shoulder and hip, very similar. The elbow and the knee, very similar. The wrist and the ankle, very similar. So generally, the addressing of them is going to look very similar. Right.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Arnika, how do we know if our shoulder is fucked up?
The first thing we got to do is assess to make sure that you have a full range of motion. One of my biggest pet peeves is seeing people throw up way over their head. And reality is they don't have a full range of motion of shoulder flexion to even get in that position. So we got to make sure that we have full range, specifically talking about shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, and specifically external and internal rotation.
Yep. Yeah. And for my people dangling from a bar, we got to make sure that you have full shoulder abduction as well. Snatch positions, everything. Like, what part of the range is limited, right? So lacking range of motion is huge, especially for all my CrossFitters that want to use a barbell, right? We have two arms capable of two different ranges of motion. And if you are lacking in one arm, but have full range in the other, and you use a barbell, you are now stressing that hindered arm or that one lacking range. You're forcing it into a position that it doesn't want to go to, and it's going to get pissed off, right? It's going to get fucked up, right? So exactly. I usually recommend my people that lack range of motion, either on both sides, or if one side is worse than the other, just use dumbbells until you earn that range of motion. You earn the right to use that barbell, because your body will figure out a way to do it.
Exactly.
It'll compensate. It'll figure it out, but it's not necessarily the best thing for you. So yes, so lacking range of motion. And then what about too much range of motion? Is that a problem?
Yes, that's definitely a problem. We got to learn how to stabilize and lock in and be able to control our shoulder. A good chunk of it is honestly being able to control our scapula to that rib cage and lock in. Yep. That's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Lacking the shoulder for sure. Yeah. And I know you included huge range of motion in the shoulder, but and it's great. Yes, let's have that range, but it's about, can you control and can you stabilize throughout that range, right? Having a big range of motion, not necessarily a great thing if you don't have the strength to control it. So yes, checking range of motion. What about strength? Are there certain things that we should test for strength capability within the shoulder?
Definitely. I know one of the biggest things is making sure, I got a couple things. One thing is, it's so much shit with the shoulder.
I know,
because the biggest thing that I noticed is
another two-parter.
Right, exactly. Making sure that we know how to use our deltoids and our shoulder muscles. I love we did lateral raises in my workout from you today, and being able to separate when you're compensating those pecs for everything and lifting up, as opposed to, do you have the strength in your actual shoulders and your actual deltoids to lift something up in that shoulder abduction.
Yeah. And it's all about setting your shoulder in the right spot before then attempting movement, right? Like, I talk about this all the time with people. I'm like, you need to set yourself and get tight before starting movement. Otherwise, your body's not going to figure out how to do it mid-range, right? So if you are going to do a lateral raise, you've got to set your shoulders first and then go through that range. The second you feel yourself slip out of position, you're done. That's the end of your range, right? So, but yeah, strength balance for me is a huge thing when it comes to shoulders, right? So people are generally going to be stronger pressing or pulling, or stronger horizontal pressing, pulling, stronger vertical pressing, pulling. So you have to test that and do some strength testing to see where your deficiencies fly. And everybody's different. Some people are much stronger pushing. Some people are much stronger pulling. Some people can't do this upright high pull position. Everybody thinks it causes impingement. It does not cause impingement. If you have impingement issues, that will affect you, but it's not a range of motion that you should avoid. It is a range of motion that you should attack, right? So there's all about horizontal, vertical pushing and pulling, right? You have to be balanced there. So can you do as many pull-ups as you can pressing up? Not as many, but there's a strength balance. There's numbers there. And then vertical push, pull, and then upright push, pull, right? Can you do a high pull? Can you do dips, right? There's a lot of motions in the shoulder. And if you're lacking on one then not the other, then you're gonna be imbalanced, and you're gonna be dealing with impingement issues, or where your shoulder sits, or hey, every time I do pull-ups, my shoulder feels like it's all messed up. Well, you might be lacking in pressing positions, so it's figuring it out and going through all that testing. Assessment, we cannot put this, we can't harp on this enough.
The hugest, and there's so many muscles in the shoulder that attach. The biggest thing that I notice with clients is them coming, I think I sprained or I did something to my rotator cuff. And I'm like, you realize that there's multiple muscles in there, right? A rotator cuff isn't just one muscle.
Just a few.
So that's the biggest thing that I noticed. And I'm like, okay, we got to figure it out. Are you messing up an internal rotation? Which with us sitting a lot more, people don't understand or know that those pec muscles and some of those muscles attached to the front of our shoulder and cause that rounded shoulder position. So if you sit like this for 8 hours and then you go and you try to lift something over your head and you're wondering why you don't have that range of motion, that's the biggest thing. Which muscles do we actually need to attack? Which ones we need to mobilize and which ones do we need to strengthen?
Yes, figuring out which ones need to be stretched and which ones needs to be strengthened, because you can't just blanket cover all those, right? Like, oh, I saw this cool thing on Instagram. That's great. I'm glad that you're researching, that you're looking for things to do. But if you skip over the assessment part, you could be just spinning your wheels and working on something that is either not going to fix you or is going to cause more damage. So the assessment, we cannot harp on it enough, how important it is to go in and figure out what you need. Good. And then scapular movement, right?
Yes.
How does that scapular move? If that thing is stuck, your shoulder is fucked. Period.
Done. That's a hashtag. Done. If that is stuck, your shoulder's fucked. I'm making it a thing.
You heard it here first, people.
Right.
But yes, right? Like scapular movement, that thing has to move in order for the whole thing to work, right? Your clavicle has to move too. Everybody forgets about that collarbone. That collarbone has to move too. So if you're stuck here, that shoulder ain't going anywhere either, right? So this is where it comes, like, you need somebody to go in there and look or do the research and find out what needs to be assessed in order to get that full range of motion of the shoulder. It's hugely, hugely important. Scapular mobility, stability, strength, balance, and range of motion. All right. That's how we find out if it's fucked up. Okay. How do we unfuck it up? What do we need to do, Doc?
So the first thing I like to start with is some band work. I love bands specifically for this. I love band work, honestly, just enough to feel the muscle. I'm learning that a lot of people don't know that, like, our trap has a middle part and a lower part, and there's muscles on our back which control that scapula. So I like to start with banded work. Actually, I did these earlier because I had some external rotators happening in my program. But honestly, grabbing a band enough to just pull resistance outward is enough to know what you're feeling, those traps in the back. So I like band work just to be able to feel what that muscle should feel like when you engage it.
Yes, I love band work for, like, scapular slides, stability holds, anything. Yes, there's also this handy dandy little tool if you have never seen one of these. Girl, I'm about to blow your mind. Okay, so the power reel, I actually have a whole video of me explaining them on IGTV. It's just a wonderful little tool that is banded resistance. Girl,
where can I get that? I need to get that. Put it in my cart.
You can get it on Amazon. I'm not sponsored, though I should be, because I don't know how many clients bought this. But there's different resistances, 3, 5, and 8. I think there is. So yellow, red, and blue. But I like it because there is a handle. And what I see so often with people doing banded resistance exercises is that they don't grip the band, and they either loosen it in their fingers or they collapse at the wrist, and then they don't get that full line of tension all the way up into the shoulder, and they're not using the right things. They end up compensating. So I love this. It's very similar to crossover symmetry, which a lot of my CrossFitters end up using, which I think is great. I love the whole system, but you have to attach it to something, and it's a series of bands, right? So this is very portable. I keep it in my bag. We have 3 at the gym, and you can just use it and pull on it. You can do all your external rotation. You can do diagonal. You can add it with a lunge. Girl, I got so many exercises for this. You can put it behind your back. You can press. So if you do...
On the tip, I'm going to be getting that.
I know. I know. If you need to strengthen, I do highly recommend that power reel. Most people need to strengthen. If anything, just prime the shoulders for any type of movement. I highly recommend that. So yes, unfucking your shoulder. Banded exercises are hugely important. I also love them, and I posted it yesterday, for allowing you to feel whether you do have an instability in a certain range of motion, right? So if you use a band for a pressing pattern and you're like, just like, holy crap, just moving around, then you know you're lacking instability. So yes, I am a huge fan for all different range of motions and banded exercises for the shoulder. Absolutely. So what about mobility, right? In order to unfuck our shoulder, we got to figure out how do we mobilize it.
Exactly. Got to figure out what needs to be moved. I think it depends on what we're mobilizing. A good chunk of us, we're going to be mobilizing our internal rotators, so like our pecs, our lats. So I prefer a lot of like pec stretches are a big thing, but I also like shoulder cards. So slow and controlled movements going through that entire shoulder range of motion is one of my biggest things. Can you even get to that range of motion?
Right.
And what position do we need to put you in order to help you get there? Sometimes you notice that you may not have that range of motion standing, but if we put you on your back, maybe we can do some shoulder mobility there. So putting you in whatever position we need to be so that you can mobilize that shoulder.
Yes, yes. I know so many people that they have the range of motion laying down, but then the second you stand or you have a little bit of resistance, even if it's just gravity, they then lose that range of motion. Well, then how do we find a way to strengthen and access that range and stabilize that range? You have to get in a range that you can, in a position that you can, in fact, get there. So yes, making sure that you get to that end range in order to stabilize in that end range. But definitely the mobilization, right? Like it's like most of us, we can't externally rotate. It's a very common, we're going to be deficient internal rotation and have over external rotation. And we're also going to be very strong when we do internal rotation and lacking on external rotation. That's a very general, but that's probably most people.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely getting into that. I like to just have people put their hand behind their back here and then just resist a little bit. Resist and relax. Resist and relax. You know, like just start accessing that position a little bit. You'll start feeling a little pull. But there's so many things that you can do. Again, go back to the assessment. Where are you lacking? And then attack that, but definitely mobilize and then stabilize, right? Don't just get that range of motion and then not take the time to stabilize within that range of motion. It's not about how far can you move. It's about how far can you move with control. With those cars are huge for that. So yes, shoulder cars address imbalance, right? So if you have a hard time doing high rep pull-ups, but you can press overhead all day long, then you need to correct that imbalance. If you can do a bunch of dips, but you cannot do high pulls, you need to correct that imbalance, right? So do the strength testing and then attack it. Also, fix the imbalance from left to right, right? Like it happens in the body, in the lower body. If we have an imbalance from left to right, it's going to fuck up our back. If we have an imbalance from left to right on the shoulder, it's going to fuck up our neck, our back, everything, right?
Exactly. That's where the assessment comes into play so much. You're not just spinning your wheels doing something that's not benefiting you. I know one thing we're working on, my right shoulder, I have flexibility, but I'm working on control and stability. But this left shoulder, I got to get it moving. So you got to figure out what works best. And some of the best things I love are those I's, Y's, and T's.
Yes.
Man. Slow and controlled. You'd be surprised how many people are throwing on weight. I'm like, but can you control this? Can we start body weight and just bringing your shoulders back? Those are my favorite things to help control and start strengthening those muscles in the back of the shoulder.
And just being mindful, right? Like it's not about how much weight can we put up over our head or how much weight can we bench press. It's about how much weight can we do with proper positioning, right? So biggest thing I like to teach people when they first is how do you pack your shoulder, right? Because your shoulder can be really loose right here, loosey-goosey, you're affecting the capsule, you are not in a strong position, but you lock that bitch in, you're good to go.
It should be strong.
Right? So packing the shoulder is a huge, huge thing to learn how to do when you're pushing, pulling, when you're first introducing exercise. And how we do that, we go up, back, down, boom. That thing is locked in, right? And you want to lock it into that position before pressing, bench pressing, before overhead pressing, before pulling, before rowing, before anything. You want to make sure that that shoulder is trapped and locked into that position. If you test it out, you will just feel how much stronger. Yes, you're strong, you're stable, you're good to go as soon as you pack that shoulder. The second it slips out, you're done with your reps.
That's injury.
Right? That's it. Exactly. You're done. Like, be mindful of when you fall out of these positions so that you don't keep fucking up your shoulder, right? Like, you got to stay stuck.
And notice how when Ty locked that shoulder in, she didn't have to extend backward her thoracic spine. Being able to have that, we talked about the T-spine last week, and being able to have that mobility and extension there. If you have that mobility, you can lock that shoulder in and not having to be like, yep, I got it. But no, you don't. So being able to move that scapula around that rib cage.
Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. So, and then one of my biggest things, okay, pull-up position, right? So if you do not have the range of motion to go overhead, maybe you need to adjust your position, right? Some people do not have that range with their palm facing forward, but if their thumb faces back, then they do have that range, right? So then adjust your position on the pull-up bar. Can you use the rings in order to allow your body to go into a more comfortable position? Can you use a neutral grip in that pull-up, right? Like, how the only way we can unfuck our shoulder is to limit irritation happening to the area, right? So don't do all these banded exercises and mobilizing without then removing what is causing the pain and the problem, right? Okay.
Yes. What do you think about, and it's your opinion, do you think that scapular pull-ups should be like a progression to like a full pull-up? Because I feel like if you can't control your scapula.
Yep. Or even just, I mean, just hanging from the bar, right?
Yes,
so, yes. So I like to do inverted rows. We had this today. I like to do inverted rows and little by little get ourselves into that vertical pulling position. But absolutely, there's scapular pull-ups. There's just dead hanging from the bar. Can your grip hold onto the bar? And that's what I have next on is grip strength, right? Like, so if you start slipping out of position on anything that you're holding, that goes all the way up and you start slipping out of position here. So one of the biggest things that I cannot put across enough, I talk about this almost as much as I talk about taking off your belt for deadlifting, is you got to grip it. You have to grip whatever you are trying to use. And that is hugely important for pull-ups and dangling from the bar. I hate the suicide grip. Let go of the suicide grip. Stop at the suicide grip, that open grip. Wrap your thumb around the bar, wrap it around your fingers, and lock that in, right? The second you're slipping here, you're done. Right? So yes, dangling from a bar, establishing that scapular strength and stability first, hugely important. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. I love those things. I know something I do with clients when we're working on shoulder is just taking a dowel rod and just have them even be able to lift this over their shoulder and pack their scapula in that motion. We start there. We have to start being aware.
Yep. Scapular pressing, scapular pulling. Absolutely. Scapular rows, scapular push-ups,
everything. Hashtag scap everything.
Yes. Right. If the scapula is stuck.
Right. Exactly.
What was our hashtag?
Oh, wait. Start over. I'm ready. Start over. I'm ready.
If the scapula is stuck.
You're fucked.
Your shoulder is fucked. Absolutely. All right. So grip strength is huge. We want to make sure that when we are unfucking our shoulder, we want to make sure that we are developing strength, stability, right, in all the ranges, right? So this is overhead carries. This is single arm planks. This is hanging from the bar. Like, we want to make sure that we develop stability in all the ranges, and then making sure our grip strength is, or lack thereof, is not inhibiting what the shoulder is capable of or exposing it to danger, right? If you loosen up that grip, you are exposing the shoulder capsule to danger. Don't do it. And I'm talking to my CrossFitters that are doing kipping pull-ups.
I was about to bring that up.
Yes.
If we can't go, if we don't have shoulder flexion, we're literally going in that motion for kipping.
Right.
We're prone to injury. I see so many people doing kipping. I'm like, we're not there yet. I know like you have the strength to pull yourself up. but there's
Yes.
so many more motions and movements we got to do first.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I love kipping pull-ups. Obviously, I think they're great. And I love them for developing strength in the pull-up, right? But what I see is either people lacking the range of motion and forcing themselves into the range, or having too much range of motion and opening up really wide and getting this big, huge kip. And I'm like, which is not necessary if you have a proper kipping pattern, and it's hugely problematic. Or they have a loose grip on the bar, or that suicide grip, and I can just see their shoulders tearing, right?
Ooh.
So full grip on the bar, knuckles over, stay in a nice tight kipping position. You do not need a big, huge kip, and don't do it unless you have earned the right to dangle from the bar and get into that over flexion, right? That extended flexion, hyperflexed position of the shoulder. Woo! I'm having a hard time this morning. All right, so that's unfucking it. How do we not fuck it up again? Okay, how do we minimize risk of injury going forward, Dr. Anika?
So the first thing is, after we have assessed and figured out what needs to create or what needs to be mobile, we do some mobility shoulder workouts, or shoulder mobility, before we even get to our workout. So for instance, any of the stretching we talked about, if you have like a lacrosse ball, tennis ball, getting some movements. I know one of the favorite things I like to do is the scapular reach. I do that before any type of shoulder workouts to make sure that I'm not using my trap. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah, it's just keeping it up, right? Like, so just same with all the other stuff we did, right? Like, just because you've treated it and you've unfucked it doesn't mean it's not capable of getting fucked up again, right? So we have to stay on it. Like, so maybe you were doing your rehab 5-6 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever, and now maybe you only have to do it when you are going into those positions. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that you just get to be like, I'm all better. No, because if we are going to keep using our bodies and putting them in these positions of stress, then we have to give it the TLC that it deserves and make sure that it is prepared, right? And it has to stay strong, right? What do I say all the time? Your body has default patterns, right? And if you got to a certain point where you were injured, your body will default to going back to that pretty easily until you really spend the time, and I'm talking about years, fixing your default patterns. This stuff takes time. So if you just say, I'm all better, I'm pain-free, and then go right back into it, you're going to be pissed, right? You're going to be really angry.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I like to tell people, unless you're pain-free for a month, something is bugging me. Unless you're pain-free for a month, keep it up as if it's acute injury. And then after that, you can kind of peel back a little bit, but you are not done. You are not done. You have to stay on top of it. So stabilizing regularly, strengthening regularly, just put these in your bag, use them, and then fixing that strength balance regularly, right? So if you have, single arm pressing, or if you have overhead pressing, spend some time on that weaker side, add a couple of sets in on that side, or spend some time doing overhead carries, like single arm overhead carries, right? If you're going to press with the barbell, which side is deficient? Spend time getting that, welcoming that shoulder to the party, right? Like, let's fix those strength imbalances ongoing, right? You're gonna default to not being as strong. You have to stay on top of it.
Right.
Okay, what about overuse?
Overuse is a whole thing. So I'm never a person like, listen, we need to rest. But we do have some active recovery that we need to do. A lot of us have overuse on these pecs because we push so much shit instead of pulling.
Especially right now with at-home workouts.
Yes. We need to add in pulling movements. That's the biggest thing. We need to work on making sure one of the biggest muscular imbalances, everything on our front feeling so tight and compact, that's pulling us forward. We got to pull and work more so on the back. That's how we end up with some of this. Yep.
Yeah, and just our natural sitting posture.
Exactly. We can't sit like this for hours and then expect to be able to do something that opens our shoulders up.
Or sit like this for hours and then do 100 push-ups every day.
Right.
Okay, so So yeah, but that, and then all my CrossFitters, right? And specifically talking to my CrossFitters now, if you are going to do 100 kipping pull-ups, and then the next day or 2 days later, you're like, wow, I feel like I have shoulder impingement. I want you to think about what you just did to your body, to the positioning of your shoulder. Like, what muscles are tight? How is your shoulder sitting after doing 100, 150 kipping pull-ups, right? Or, 100, Murph, right? 100 pull-ups,
Right.
200 push-ups, 300 squats. How is your shoulder sitting after doing a bout of exercise like that, right? Like, are you injured, or is your shoulder just trying to tell you, that was a little too much, right? And specifically right now with the open, everybody is really pushing the limits here, right? And so overuse injuries right now for my CrossFit community happens in a 3-week span, right? Like, it's
Right.
like, because they're doing these really extreme workouts. I did it myself. It's exhausting, and they're doing them maybe multiple times per week. And so if you don't specifically train for that type of stress on the body, like, these CrossFit Games athletes are putting in 6-8 hours a day in the gym. You are not. So if you go in and now you're putting your body under that same type of stress, expect for your body to bark at you and be pissed off. And you might not feel it now. You might not feel it next week. But in 3 weeks, 6 weeks, I want you to remember
That
everything that you
impingement
put
that
your
you were
body
feeling.
through.
Right.
Everything that happens. And I tell people, I'm like, unless there was blunt force injury, blunt force trauma, right? Like, you literally, wow, I just hurt my shoulder, or I fell out of a truck, whatever, then there is just muscular imbalance. So there's just some micro tears that are happening, and we can fully address it. A lot of times people think they have a labral tear, or they have a acromion impingement or something. I'm like, you're just pissed. Your shoulders are tight, right? Like, your lats are overworking and your pecs aren't working enough, or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So overuse injuries are huge. And so in order to not fuck up your shoulder again, you have to return to sport gently, right?
Yeah.
You can't just fix your shoulder and then expect to do Murph the next day, right? Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to reintroduce the high rep and the high volume at a rate that your body can control, right? So just hugely important.
And this is the best time to get it checked out. Like, we're in the middle of the open, what literally just started.
Yeah.
It's about to go ham. And the best time is when you're noticing those kipping push-ups and you keep getting that impinge or that sucky feeling. Now is the time to get it checked out. Yep. CrossFit, when done correctly, those movements are amazing for your body. Amazing. And it shouldn't feel painful. So any impingement, any pain, that means that we're just not doing something correctly. And we need to check that out now before you start pushing it hard at AMRAPs.
Yeah. I mean, and now is the time where things start exposing, and you're like, wow, I was really deficient in that particular workout. Okay, well then, are you just going to do it again next year, or are you going to spend this whole year actually fixing that and addressing those issues? Like, in training appropriately. If you want to really compete in the open, then you have to train appropriately all year long. It doesn't just magically happen in the open. I see so many people get injured. I love the open. I love CrossFit. I want you to do it safely. That means you have to do the work in order to earn full participation. And if you don't have it, then modify it, right? Modify the shit out of these workouts. That's fine. You're still going to get a good workout in. You ain't
modifications are still death, okay?
Scaling
Even with
is cool.
modified,
Absolutely.
I'm still like, is this a modification? Because my arm's still
exactly. Actually, if you modify appropriately, then you get the proper stimulus to the workout, right? Like, they're supposed to affect you in a certain way. And if you don't modify appropriately, you're not getting the proper stimulus, and you're not working the way that you should be. So contact me. I will give you a modification. I'm posting a modification after they post the workouts every week for this open, because I want you to compete safely, right? It doesn't matter. Nobody that I'm talking to is going to the games. So modify in order to train for longevity, and in order to be able to go back to the gym the next day and be like, look, I actually feel fine, right? Okay, so last thing, right? So overuse, and then yes, never the suicide grip. That's literally the last thing, and I have it circled and highlighted and everything.
Like this.
Never the suicide grip. Please do not dangle from the bar with that open grip. Try to wrap that hand around. Make sure that you're nice and stable, and work on your grip strength, right? The grip has everything to do with what's going on in your shoulder. If you're loose here and you don't have the ability to dangle from the bar for an extended period of time, you should be able to hold it. You should be able to do switch grip routines. You should be able to really control yourself hanging from the bar before exposing yourself to any type of kipping whatsoever. All right. What else, Doc? What do we got?
That's it. I think we got everything.
Yes. Right. So packing the shoulder, right?
Yes.
Making sure that that's in a nice stable position, making sure that you have strength balance with pushing, pulling in all directions, making sure that you have stability in all the directions, making sure that your scapular moves. Oh, and then the impact on the elbow from the shoulder is hugely important, right? So if you feel like you have elbow problems,
what are you looking up here?
look right there. Yes, we'll talk about that next week, but still, right? So it's just putting it all together. We can't talk enough about how important assessment is. Make sure that you get in there and assess properly, use the proper tools in order to address it, and then eliminate what is irritating it during your workouts, right? Like figure out what is causing the problem and then modify or adjust accordingly so that your body has time to heal. It's about providing the optimal environment for healing. And if you don't do that, it's an uphill battle, right?
Right.
All right. Is that it? Is that all we got
that
for
is
this
it.
week? All right.
Yes.
Next, we are doing the elbow. Please share these lives with anybody you think it could help. It helps us. We want to help you. And if you have any questions, I always post this. If you have questions, please go into the comment section and deliver them, because we want to make sure that we address the things that are bothering you, right? This is very general for the whole population, but we want to do the things that affect you. Okay. So nice talking to you, Doc.
You too, Ty.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.